I tell you, if you are feeling exasperated or frustrated or angry or at wit's end, or if you are feeling that all is lost, you got good reasons to feel the way you feel. But if you are feeling helpless or feeling hopeless, I gotta stop you right there. Because there isn't good reason to feel either of those things. I have this wonderful blessing of being able to go all over the state and meet with every imaginable kind of group. One day it'll be a county Democratic Party meeting, and the next day it's a Waukesha County Rotary Club that I'm speaking to. And so I get a chance to talk to all kinds of groups all across the spectrum. And I'm telling you, there is something going on out there that there is something stirring that we can tap into. But I will say this, we're going to have to think outside the box. And we're going to have to think and act differently than we have for decades if we're going to fully take advantage of opportunities that are out there. If you're downhearted about what's going on in our state, you got good reasons to feel that way, because Wisconsin is a shadow of its former self. When I think of the state that I grew up in, and I think of a pristine environment and all these clean lakes and streams, and I think about the fact that I grew up on a dairy farm, and I think about what dairy farming was like when I was growing up, and when I look at what that industry looks like now, when I think about how we were an industrial powerhouse, this state was. And now we're leading the nation in shrinkage of the middle class. We're dead last in new business startups. This state's a shadow of its former self. When I think of our schools, I remember we would always be talking about whether, our test scores were first in the nation, or whether maybe Iowa edged us out, or maybe Minnesota. But we took pride in the fact that we had some of the finest schools anywhere in the country. And now the latest national assessment of our schools gave Wisconsin a C+. We've been sliding steadily toward mediocrity. And so there too, we are a shadow of our former selves. And so yeah, there's reason to feel downhearted, but there is something stirring out there, and I pick up on it everywhere I go. There is a tremendous opportunity to help this state turn the corner, but I will say that we are going to have to think and act differently. We are going to have to get out of boxes that we've been in for a really long time, and we are going to have to invent a new politics. Because the transformation that is possible in this state requires a new politics. We can't keep doing the things that we've been doing for such a long time. And I was just sitting back there marveling at how well informed you all are and how much knowledge is in this room. But then just the last presentation got me thinking about something. We've been getting our pants beat off by the other side because they have been so much better than us about talking simply and plainly to the people of Wisconsin about what they want this state to be. And we've got lots of facts, and we've got data, and we have an enormous amount of knowledge, and we try to share all of what we know with people, and then the other side is able to, in a sentence or less, get them all to say, well, but that makes more sense. And just think about the parental choice program. Just think about the parental choice program. It's about 25 years old, 26 years old. Before that program was ever created, there was parental choice. Yes. People could send their kids to private schools and did. Yes. Or they could send their kids to public schools, and most did. That program didn't create parental choice. What that program did is created taxpayer-subsidized private schooling. That's what the program is. But the people who created that program and the people who are trying to expand that program to every nook and cranny of our state, they of course knew that they would never be successful in this crusade of theirs if they told people, here's what we want to do. We want to take money away from your public schools, and we want all taxpayers to subsidize the decisions that a few are making to send their kids to private schools. That never would have flown in Wisconsin. So what did they do? They said, we want parental choice. And for all the facts we possess, for all the knowledge we have about how this program actually works and what it is doing to our state and to our public schools, for all that knowledge, still people go, but I think parental choice is a good idea. I like the idea of parental choice. We have to become just as good at messaging, at labeling, at communicating that simply to people about what our values are. And that brings me to a point I've got to challenge you to think about. Like I said, I get a chance to talk to every imaginable kind of group. One day it was a Waukesha County Rotary Club, a group of local business people in the reddest of red counties. And another day, the day before, it actually was a county Democratic Party meeting. The fascinating thing is that everywhere I go, I not only get a chance to share thoughts, but I also get to sit and listen to people and hear what they're talking about, hear the problems that they're struggling with. Afterwards, I get to have wonderful conversations. I was in Green Bay, and after I spoke, the guy makes a beeline across the room. He's wearing a Ben Carson cap. And he said he had a bone to pick with me. And we went on to have this wonderful half-hour conversation and actually found that we had quite a bit in common. More than you would imagine I would have in common with a guy wearing a Ben Carson cap. And so I get a chance to talk to people, but also listen to people. And one of the things I ask folks everywhere I go is, what are your values? What's underneath? What explains the positions you take on issues? And here's the fascinating thing. I challenge you to take this to heart and think about it. When I talk to conservative audiences, it is fascinating how consistently they answer that question. How uniformly conservatives answer that question. Everywhere I go, basically their answer revolves around 6 themes. And they all can express this. They say we are for less government, lower taxes, individual liberty, free market economics, something that they would describe as sort of old-fashioned family values, and patriotism. Now sometimes patriotism gets expressed as military strength or homeland security. Sometimes these values get said in a slightly different way, but it is fascinating how everywhere you go, when you talk to conservatives, they basically all express those 6 basic themes. But when I go and talk to a progressive or liberal audience or a Democratic audience, or whatever you want to call them, often when I ask that question, what are your values? Because I'll say, here's what I hear from conservatives, what are your 4? Or what are your 6? And often the answer is crickets. People sort of look at me and they shrug. And I can't tell you how many times they've said, well, what should they be? What should our 4 or 6 be? Or, more commonly, they will start naming issues that they're concerned about. And I'll say, no, I got to stop you right there. What are your values? What values determine your positions on all those issues you care about? And I'm fascinated at how incapable audiences on the left typically are. What that does is it creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, people on the right get to define people on the left by default. If you can't define your own values, they define your values for them. And if the people who call themselves conservatives are for less government and lower taxes, then you surely are for more government and higher taxes. And I tell you, if you're going to do battle on the political landscape, and one side's for less government and lower taxes, and you're for more government and higher taxes, you will lose. And you will lose repeatedly. And so we have to be just as good, we have to get just as good as they are at labeling, messaging, and giving voice to what we really believe at our core. And if we don't, if we just continue to have faith that if we stuff enough facts down people's throats that they will surely see the wisdom of our ways and agree with us, we'll continue to get beaten. Because one of the things I've experienced or learned over all of my years around politics and during all of my travels is that when facts and values collide, people will happily discard the facts and they will hold tight to their values. The other thing that I've learned is that if you can have the best argument in the world, you can have the facts on your side, you can even, here's the fascinating thing, you can even have a position on issues that the majority of the population agrees with. And you can still lose if they don't trust the messenger. They will reject the message if they don't trust the messenger. And I often hear people on the left say, the majority of Americans actually agree with us on our positions on the issues, so they should support us. What the missing piece there is that even on those issues, where most people agree with your position, they don't trust that you really believe what you're saying. They don't trust that you actually will do, if your folks are put in office, that they will actually do what they say they're for. And that's a big problem. If they don't trust the messenger, they will still reject the message, even if you've got the facts on your side. And I think something that we all have to take to heart, a basic truism from my vantage point, is that people really don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And I think an awful lot of people, working class people, people in rural areas, really believe that the left, or the Democratic Party, or however you want to define that over there, that they don't really care about us. In fact, they look down on us. They think we're stupid and are voting against our own interests. They disrespect us. So it doesn't matter if they say that they want to do something to help us, because we don't trust that they're authentic in what they say, because we feel looked down upon. So, everywhere I go, when I do have the occasions to vote, to talk with progressive or left-leaning or liberal audiences, there's an article of faith that I run into everywhere I go. And I hear it expressed over and over again. And that's that there are these voters out there, especially rural voters, who are stupidly voting against their own interests. I have to tell you, I grew up on a dairy farm in Clark County. I don't have any shame in saying that when I reflect on my most influential teachers, when I think about the teachers who had the biggest impact on my life, two come to mind for me, and neither of them had high school diplomas. The people who are most responsible for the person I became didn't possess high school diplomas. And so when I hear people say on the left that these rural people are stupid and are voting against their own interests, they are talking about my neighbors. They're talking about people who I would count among my most influential and important teachers. I would say to you, stop saying that. And I would even go farther. Stop thinking it. Because if you're thinking it, they'll know. They're not stupid. They can read you like a book. They're not stupid and they're not voting against their own interests. Now, it's true that you may see their interests differently than they see their interests, but you can't impose your definition of their interests on them. We've got to do way more to listen to them and to figure out how they see their interests and then make them a better offer. That's our obligation, I think. And so when I hear people, it pains me so much when I run into that article of faith, and I run into it so many places. These people are stupid and they're voting against their own interests. I think they do know that that's how you feel about them. And if you think they're backward and are stupid and are voting against their own interests, then you really think you can then say, and you should vote for us. Come on. I think we have to have more empathy. And we have to have a willingness to open our minds to what they're struggling with. And I think most importantly, and here's where I really want to finish today. It is not enough to be a part of a resistance. I see a resistance growing. And to some extent that resistance is inspiring. I see people moved off of their couches and into meeting halls and onto the streets, pushing back against what they are concerned about or what frustrates them or what scares them. But a resistance is not enough, because it's not enough to be against something. We have to be for something. And so the next opportunity for an election is going to be 2018. And those midterm elections and that election for governor is going to be the next opportunity to start to move our state in a different direction. But I'll tell you this, if that election ends up being about one person, whether you love him or hate him, if it ends up being about one person, he's going to win again. That election has to be about what 5 million people in this state want this state to become. It has to be about people's hopes and dreams, not one person and whether he's been good or bad. It is not enough to be against one governor or a president or a group of legislators. We've got to do a much better job of expressing what we're for. And we've got to do it in a way that isn't drowning people in facts and data, but that speaks to the heart about what we want Wisconsin to become. Now, personally, I think that we ought to aspire as a state to create an economy where if you work, you won't be poor. And we don't have that economy. And people on the right would have to admit that we don't have that economy. And that has to be our goal, is if you are willing to put in an honest day's work, you shouldn't go hungry. You shouldn't find it impossible to make ends meet. And you all are seeing, how many of you would consider yourself Democrats? Your party is seen as the party of handouts. The party that taxes those who work and gives to those who don't. Now you can say that that's an unfair characterization, that's the result of decades of propaganda, and yeah, there's been plenty of propaganda on that topic. But so the response to that has to be something better than no, we're not. It has to be an articulation of a vision of what we should have. And we should have an economy that benefits everybody. Not just one group of people over here or some group of people over there, but an economy where if you work, you won't be poor. And we should have a Wisconsin where education is as affordable for our kids and grandkids as it was for their parents and grandparents. That should be something that is a bottom line for us. We should accept no less than that. We should be a state where everybody, and I mean everybody, has access to 21st century necessities like high-speed internet and mobile phone service. We should be a state that commits to taking those 21st century necessities to every household, to every doorstep in our state, everywhere. And that is something that we don't have. We're not even close to that. I grew up on a gravel road. And I always assumed that that road would one day be paved. And it's still gravel. But the more alarming thing is that instead of that progress that I assumed would happen, I always assumed that our road would one day be paved. Instead, we've got townships around our state that are tearing up pavement and going back to gravel because they can't afford to fill the potholes. And we should be a state where no community anywhere turns paved roads back into gravel. And we should be a state where nobody anywhere is afraid to turn on a water faucet and drink what comes out. We have to present that kind of vision to the people of Wisconsin and challenge them to think about what kind of state do we want this to be. Because I heard these stories just here today about St. Croix County. Well, I was over in Kewaunee County. A third of wells there are contaminated. A third of the wells are contaminated in Kewaunee County, and there are people I've talked to who turn on the water faucet and what comes out is brown and smells like cow manure. And that should not be the case anywhere in our state. And we shouldn't be afraid to say that that's the state we want and that's the state we expect, where nobody turns on a water faucet and is afraid to drink what comes out. And it's not just CAFOs doing that to us. Milwaukee has an incidence of lead poisoning twice the rate found in Flint, Michigan. Yeah. And here Flint, Michigan the words Flint, Michigan have become synonymous with public health crisis. Yet Milwaukee has an incidence of lead poisoning twice that of Flint's. And Lake Mills has an incidence of lead poisoning almost as high as Flint. So little Lake Mills, they're afraid to turn on the water and drink what comes out too because of lead. Excessive lead content in their water. That is not the kind of Wisconsin I remember, nor the kind of Wisconsin I want to live in. And I think if we can speak that simply to people about the kind of Wisconsin that we want, there is still in this state enough people who understand that we've been slipping, who understand that we are a shadow of our former selves. And they will respond, but not to just being inundated with facts and data and bill numbers and all the rest, but who will respond to a vision. And they've been offered a vision like parental choice, and a whole bunch of people have more or less embraced that vision, but they've got to be told that what that really is just taxpayer subsidized private schooling. Yeah. It's about taking money away from the school your kids go to, and it's giving a taxpayer subsidy to people who almost the majority of whom already were sending their kids to private school. That's the amazing thing about the parental choice program, is that most of the people who are benefiting already were sending their kids to private schools. They were already exercising that choice. Now they're just having all the taxpayers of Wisconsin subsidize that choice. We've got to talk in those terms. And I don't think that it's enough to say we need more transparency in this program. We should end this program. And I would end it on these grounds. There should be a rule that if a government program works, you keep it and you fund it. And if it doesn't work, you get rid of it. And by that standard, the voucher program should be eliminated because it's 25 years old, and to this day, voucher students aren't doing any better than public school students, and by some measures they're doing worse. The promises that this was going to make education better, that it was going to improve student achievement, it has failed. When a government program fails that miserably, you do away with it. And you focus those resources on schools and make them as good as they used to be in Wisconsin. And we can't be bashful about any of this stuff. We can't accept a program that the right wants to call parental choice and be afraid to challenge that concept. We need to say, no, there was always parental choice. Now what we've got is taxpayer-subsidized private schooling. That program is not delivering the promised results, and we should do away with it. And we should do away with the state's corporate welfare office, the thing called the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. It should be put out of our misery. Because the promise has been that it was going to create all these new jobs and that it was going to spawn new businesses. Wisconsin is dead last in the country in new business startups. This agency has been a miserable failure. We should take that money, we should take the money from the school voucher program, we should make education as affordable for future generations as it was in the past. We should take that money and use it to bring high-speed internet and mobile phone service to every doorstep in our state. But we have to articulate that dream. We have to be as good at expressing what we want Wisconsin to be as our opponents have been, in not only saying what they want Wisconsin policy to look like, but also defining you. They have defined you. You need to reclaim your identity and define yourselves. You need to defy them because they have spent decades defining you, turning people against you, and the opportunity, I think, now exists, and it's a greater opportunity today than it has been at any time I've been around Wisconsin politics. We have an opportunity to turn this state, but I think it starts not with bickering over issues and not trying to wow people with our knowledge and our command of data and facts, but rather it starts with us being able to express our values. And so I leave you with this. What are your 4, or what are your 5, or what are your 6 core values? What would you say is underneath all of what drives you to take the positions that you have on issues? I'll tell you mine. To me, my values are pretty simple. It starts with freedom with responsibility. And I distinguish that from individual liberty. It is not enough for us to want to live as we choose and be free, but with that comes the obligation to make sure that others are free as well. That individual liberty is not enough, we need freedom with responsibility. My second core value is democracy, both politically and economically. We should have both a political system and an economy that is truly of the people, by the people, and for the people. My third core value is equality. It is a bedrock American value. Nobody should start on third base. Equality is a core value for me. Next, I would describe it as caretaking. Caretaking means that we care for the air and the water and the land, and we take care of each other. We have each other's backs. We are there for each other when times are tough. That is a core value, and I learned that value on the farm. I learned that value when I saw a neighbor. I attended the funeral of a neighbor who hung himself in their shed because their family had been foreclosed by the bank. They were being taken off their land, and that man's son, days after burying his father, months before his family was moved off their land, that man came driving down the road and pulled into our field when we were stuck in the mud trying to harvest corn, and he hitched a chain to our tractor and he pulled us through the field with his. And of course we returned the favor and helped him harvest his corn as well. That taught me everything I needed to know about the common good. That taught me everything I needed to know about being there for each other. Because in the midst of the trauma that he was experiencing, he reached out and helped somebody who needed help. And then I also had the great blessing to participate in 2 barn raisings. One was a family that lost their barn to a fire, another to a tornado, and people came from miles around. Dozens and dozens of people who didn't even know each other came and built new barns. Basically in a day, we raised new barns for these people who had lost theirs. That's where I got my values. Those people were my most important teachers. And the fascinating thing is when people throw the welfare issue at me, when they say that, the Democrats are the party of handouts, the Democrats are the party that taxes those who work and gives to those who don't. I respond to that by telling them the stories of Les Sturz, that man who drove down the road and into our field and helped us harvest our crops after his dad had hung himself. And I tell the stories of those barn raisings, and it disables them. They don't know how to respond to that. I loved what was said before about how stories are so much more powerful than data. And that a story can stop that legislator dead in her tracks. She doesn't know what to do with a powerful story. She's been well trained to know what to say to your data or your facts. They've all been given their talking points and they know exactly how to answer that, but they can't answer that story. You are absolutely on the right track there, because that's exactly what I found. When I describe those experiences that are about core values, they're not about issues, they're not about facts, they're not about data, they're about matters of the heart, it disables them. It renders them incapable of saying, well, but you're just one of these bleeding heart liberals who, just wants to give people free stuff. I really think that in there is our salvation. In that basic understanding of being able to connect with people heart to heart, therein lies our salvation. So you impress me with your knowledge. You are so incredibly and almost intimidatingly well informed. But I challenge you to aspire to something even more powerful. And that's the capacity to speak from the heart, from a bedrock of core values. And I think that's the way we take Wisconsin from a place that is in recession, that is going backwards, that is a shadow of its former self, and we create a Wisconsin that we can be proud of again. Thank you so much for having me.